Chris Lynch News with Airpark Canterbury. Found cheaper parking? We'll beat it by 10%.
Good evening. Well, David Seymour has been officially sworn in as New Zealand's Deputy Prime Minister, taking over from Winston Peters as part of the coalition agreement, and he joins me this evening. Good evening, Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Hi, Chris. How are you going?
Very well. Good to see you. What changes in terms of government structure now that you're the Deputy, or is it largely symbolic?
You know, a position's really just an opportunity to do good. And so ultimately, every position is symbolic. The question is, what do you do with it? I think there'll be a few changes in seating. I'll have to stand in for Chris more often if he's out of Wellington, answering questions in the House, or out of New Zealand, being the acting Prime Minister. But for the most part, my life remains the same. I've got to be the MP for Epsom. I've got to be the leader of ACT. I've got to be the Minister for Regulation, Cutting Red Tape, and a few other jobs I have in health with Pharmac and education with charter schools and attendances and so on.
So do you get to change seats in Parliament? Will you be next to the Prime Minister then? That's what I want to ask you.
Yeah, so the parties swap, so we'll end up sitting down at the Speaker's end, and New Zealand First will move to where we've been.
Okay. Let's discuss your speech you gave to the party faithful today to, I suppose, celebrate your new position. You said, and I quote, that human freedom to do what you like if you don't harm others is the only thing worth truly fighting for. In terms of practical terms, I suppose, how do you ensure that kind of freedom doesn't come with the expense of vulnerable communities, or doesn't come at the expense of vulnerable communities?
You start by protecting individuals' rights so they don't become vulnerable. You need courts of law, you need a police force, you need corrections, and you need a set of rules that say you can't invade other people's physical space or privacy, you can't take or damage or destroy other people's property, and if there's any dispute, it has to be sorted out by the law in front of courts that are reliable and trusted. And if you just start from that basic idea of the rule of law, basic freedoms, protection of person and property, you'd be surprised at how much can be achieved.
You think the status quo is working okay in our political structure?
Well, we're one of, if not the most successful societies in history. There's no question about that. I mean, you only have to look at how long people live. For 100,000 years, people were lucky to make 40 on average. Now, life expectancy's doubled, and people say, well, there's a gap between different groups within New Zealand. That may be true, but it's nothing compared with the amount of progress that's been made in the last 200 years of industrialisation, massive increases in human rights, and that's all happened because of democracy and the rule of law.
In today's speech, you said our opponents traffic in the idealisation of envy. What do you mean by that?
Well, I love this country, but it's always had a dark underbelly, which is our tall poppy syndrome. And it's also true that politicians around the world can do a huge amount of, electioneering and vote winning, basically by promising other people's money. You find 10 people, you take their money and give it to 100 people, and you end up winning the election. That's why a relatively small minority of New Zealanders pay a vastly disproportionate amount of all tax. It's also why politicians like to make rules that they put to restrict how you can develop your property, what you can say, who you can do business with, how you can work, how you can be employed, how you can be an employer. There's always benefits, politically at least, for taking away other people's money and other people's freedom to reward your voters. However, that approach in the long term makes us all poorer, because what it really says is if you're someone who's doing something positive and productive, then politics will come after you. And that's why I try in my career to win political power so that I can not use it the way that others have. I want to win political power so we can uphold a free society under the rule of law where people can get on with making a difference in their own lives. And if there's people who need help, often creating an environment with good economic growth. It was easier to build homes. They're more affordable. Those are the sorts of conditions that will actually help ensure that New Zealand, and any other country for that matter, prospers for everybody.
I mean, this is probably what you said in your speech today. You said that what unites opposition parties is a poverty of spirit. The idea that other people's success is not an example of what's possible, but the source of their supporters' problems. Is that what you mean by what you just said, that there is a tall poppy syndrome in this country that continues to divide people?
Yeah, there is, and some politicians really exploit it. Chloe Swarbrick is one. If you listen to everything she says now, none of it's about the environment. Almost all of it is about some other person's got too much money, but if you vote for me, I'll take it off them. The problem for her is at some point the people in the nice suburbs of Auckland Central that elect her are going to work out she's talking about them. And that might be a bit of a problem for Chloe Swarbrick. Te Pāti Māori, again, they have the same message. What's really ugly about them is that they overlay it with race. And I'm astonished that this country has a race-based party that's increasingly violent in its rhetoric, and yet people think that's okay, especially in the mainstream media. It astonishes me.
When you say violent in their rhetoric, what do you mean? That's a serious allegation.
Well, just the other day, I mean, you had some guys associated with Te Pāti Māori saying he wanted to fight me and I deserved a smack and all this. Several current Māori Party MPs commented and liked on the post. Now, normally that sort of thing, the media will go berserk and do an investigation and get a camera in the politician's face and say, how can you possibly stand by this? Of course, we've seen none of that. It's been politely written up by the media as, he was challenged to a charity boxing match. Yeah, right. That's where we've got to.
Do you sometimes fear for your personal safety given the political tension in this country?
No, because no sane person would attack me, because they'd realise that would actually probably bring more sympathy to me than they'd like me to have. On the other hand, insane people could attack me, but insane people could attack anyone.
It's true. You said, I think it was on Twitter, I read somewhere that Te Pāti Māori shows up to Parliament to make TikTok and Instagram videos, not to better the laws of New Zealand. And, arguably some would agree and some would disagree with that. But, I mean, isn't that their strategy, though, that mobilising through social media, and if it's working effectively, isn't that effective politics, even if you disagree with the substance?
Well, effective politics is leaving New Zealand with better laws and policies so that New Zealand becomes a success. As far as I can see, they're not doing anything like that. They may be getting attention, but attention seeking is not a goal in itself. It's necessary to get people's attention so they can consider whether to vote for you. But then you've got to have something to vote for, and as far as I can tell, they don't actually make any contribution to any kind of policy debate. They just want to blame everything on events that happened before anyone alive today was actually born.
You reminded me of something that was only just last month, actually. Te Pāti Māori shared a fabricated quote on social media, falsely claiming Nicola Willis said survivors should get $0 because it's not our problem. That was fake. That wasn't correct. But and I went Googling to see who covered that story, not many news outlets at all. How concerned are you that there is a lot of misinformation in New Zealand politics? And is it time to bring back Kate Hanna, maybe?
Who? Kate Hanna.
You remember her from the Disinformation Project?
Oh, well, that was a bit of a joke. It wasn't a very funny joke because it cost taxpayer money. But no, I mean, she's what you'd charitably call a very silly person. I just think if we're going to get anywhere, you need a basic set of rules of mutual respect and dignity, playing the argument, not the person. And if you take that basic approach, then there's no limit to what we can achieve and resolve and work through. But at the moment, I see a media that basically has two different standards. They'll go out of their way to attack and accuse some parties, and then when other parties do things wrong, they'll do nothing at all. I just look at this whole thing about Chris Bishop saying, this is crap. he didn't like the performance in front of him. Maybe he didn't like it, so what? On the other hand, the same week you had a Te Pāti Māori MP saying that, non-Māori New Zealanders are lucky to live here at all, and that hasn't been the subject of any media reporting. So, it's a bit of a joke, isn't it?
Why does RNZ hate you and the ACT Party?
Well, some of them don't. Actually, I have a good relationship with the gallery. Morning Report, they've got their own problems, and just look at their ratings in freefall, have been for years. I think they've recently gone a bit nuts over the school lunches. They did about 100 stories, and yet, now the problems are all solved. The scheme is being enjoyed by the students. It's saving 50% off the cost to the taxpayer, $130 million saving this year, $170 million next year. But I think part of the problem is Radio New Zealand doesn't like reporting anything positive. So, because we've got a good news story now, we're off their radar.
Radio New Zealand ratings have dropped significantly. Its funding has been cut, and ACT has been celebrating its decline, I see on Twitter. Why?
Well, it's pretty simple. Everyone else in the media has had to downsize, become more efficient, file more stories per day, and really think hard about how they satisfy their audience. In the last 5 years, RNZ's gone from 280 full-time equivalents to 316. So if you do the maths on that, they've actually had about a 12.5% increase in staff. Don't quote me on that maths, but it's around about that. They're living in la-la land. And I think a bit of pressure to actually do good journalism, satisfy the audience, might be good, and hopefully the rest of the organisation can become as professional as their press gallery team.
What I've noticed that RNZ does shut down comments on their social media pages on stories about Te Pāti Māori and Jacinda Ardern, but throws the gates wide open when it comes to the current government under fire. Therefore, is RNZ actually serving the public, or is it protecting its ideological allies?
Well, I hadn't noticed that trend in their comment moderation, and they may have their own reason for doing that. But look, ultimately, they have a real problem that their ratings and their trust are in freefall. They can point out that other media face the similar challenges. That may be true, but the whole point of the government owning them is they're supposed to be different. And if
I want to make
they're
this
not,
quite clear.
what's the point?
I want to make this quite clear. You're not suggesting that RNZ needs to give you perhaps favourable coverage. You're suggesting more balance, right?
Well, I'm not suggesting anything other than everyone else has had a huge squeeze. I try and work with them as well as I can, but we've cut their budget because they clearly need to get the same message the rest of the media has been getting. Their trust and their ratings are in freefall, and we're not going to keep giving them taxpayers' money when they're not delivering.
I actually spoke to former Labour Minister Stuart Nash on Friday, and we both agree that the whole kind of notion of this gotcha journalism belongs perhaps to a bygone era of the late 90s when television ruled the media landscape, and I think the world's moved on and people are wanting just politicians to answer questions. It kind of feels like RNZ, and this is what he said, is sort of stuck in the past in an outdated mode of journalism where gotcha reigns supreme. Do you agree with that kind of sentiment?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I got interviewed by Guy on Espana, and I use Guy as an example because he's someone I do actually have a bit of time for. But, he's interviewing me on this 30-minute uncensored concept he's got. He's lucky to get 8,000 views on YouTube with that show. We get 20 or 30,000 just from me walking across the bridge in Parliament getting interviewed for journalists. It cost us nothing to make, and we whip it up there in 10 minutes. That's the difference, right? Now, but you think about it, this is a guy who was a really big deal. I mean, he was on TVNZ News at 6 o'clock talking to 500,000 people. He was on Morning Report talking to 500,000 people. Now he's lucky to get 8,000. And I actually think he's a pretty decent guy, but it just shows actually what he's been doing hasn't been that good all along. The way he tried to interview me wasn't that good, but hey, look, maybe it'll make for some entertainment. I think it shows that people now have more choice. And in a way, what's happened with the media is not that it's got worse. It's kept doing what it's always doing. Just a whole lot of people have just decided to go elsewhere.
It's very interesting you say that, because I know both that you, New Zealand First, and Winston Peters, you individually have your own ways of recording your own news briefings now, so people can actually see the full, the full context, as opposed to the 7-second sound bites where they're waiting to say, gotcha. That must be quite rewarding, but I bet you that frustrates the gallery now that they don't get to control the narrative, because people can go onto your Facebook pages. I think National started to do this now as well, and they can get the full context. That must irritate those reporters up there.
Yeah, well, we did it first, and New Zealand First eventually copied, and I'm surprised it's taken the Nat so long. But what we've fundamentally done is remove their power to edit. So now people can see for themselves. And yeah, I think it's fair to say that that's made us a little bit unpopular with some of the people in the media. But hey, look, now people are putting them on show as well.
As Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, is there anything that you want to be able to change with slightly more powers?
Look, I want the same things that I've always wanted, which is less tape, less regulation, less red tape, less government waste, less spending. Basically just want to return money and power to the people so that they can make choices and use their time on earth to the best of their ability. So nothing's really changed. Still got to get the regulatory standards bill through. That's critical. Still got to change the Resource Management Act to something based on property rights. That's critical. Still got to see what Brooke's doing through around the Holidays Act and the health and safety law, labour laws. I mean, that's critical. So, no, look, we got the same objectives we've always had.
Has Winston Peters congratulated you?
No, but in fairness to him, he's been away overseas.
He's pretty busy.
So, yeah, I'm not sure he's even back in New Zealand now. I know he's been in Sri Lanka and India, so he's got a bit on.
He has got a bit on. He's probably one of our best foreign ministers, that's for sure. He is everywhere. It's nice to speak with you again. Appreciate your time. Congratulations on the new gig. And we'll talk again soon. Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, David Seymour. Thank you.
Hey, that's awesome, Chris. You have a great day.